Okay, let's start reading The Magic School Bus, Space Explorers. Introduction. Hi, my name is Carlos. I am one of the kids in Ms Frizzle's class. Maybe you've heard of Miss Frizzle. Sometimes we just call her the Frizz. She is a terrific teacher, but a little strange. One of her favourite subjects is science, and she knows everything about it. She takes us on lots of field trips in the magic school bus. Believe me, it's not called magic for nothing. We never know what's going to happen when we get on the bus. Miss Frizzle likes to surprise us, but we can usually tell when she is planning a special lesson. We just look at what she's wearing. A few months ago, Miss Frizzle showed up in an astronaut jumpsuit. We had just started a unit on the solar system, so we thought Miss Frizzle was dressed up to get us in the mood. Of course, we couldn't actually take a field trip to outer space, haha, but the joke was on us. Let me tell you what happened. Chapter 1. I stuffed my homework in my backpack and ran out the door. I was in a hurry to get to school. Today was Solar System Day. Our homework was to write a report on one of the 8 planets. My report was on Mars, my favourite. I just knew my report would be the best. But that wasn't the only reason I was in a hurry. I had finally finished putting together Rocco the Rockhound robot, a remote control rover I made from a kit. I'd been working on him for weeks. There must have been a zillion parts. Now Rocco was ready to roll, and I was taking him to school for show and tell. When I got to class, Miss Frizzle was hanging up a chart of the solar system. Our solar system. The solar system is the sun and all the bodies that orbit around it. The 8 planets, their moons, asteroids, chunks of rock, and comets, balls of ice and dust. The sun is at the centre of our solar system. The sun supplies all the light and almost all the heat for everything else in the solar system. No planet, moon, comet, or asteroid has any light of its own. The solar system. One by one, the rest of the class came in. They crowded around to look at Rocco. Cool toy, Carlos, said Dorothy Ann. Most of the time we call her D.A. Rocco was modelled after Sojourner, the first robot rover to explore Mars. But Rocco looked more like a dog than a robot. As he rolled along on his wheels, his head turned from side to side and his tail wagged. He even made a little beeping noise as he moved. It sounded something like yip, yip, yip. But the best thing about Rocco was his rock pocket, a secret compartment in his back. When I pushed the button on the remote, the rock pocket opened and out popped a built-in mechanical arm with a scoop at the side. A scoop at the end, sorry. The scoop could be dragged along the ground to pick up rocks and soil. Another button on the remote turned the arm and dumped the stuff into the rock pocket. It was the neatest way to find rocks for my collection. Rocco isn't a toy, I said. He's a robot rock collector. I pushed the button to open Rocco's rock pack pocket. Inside were some rocks and reddish clay soil that Rocco had scooped up on the way to school. This soil looks a lot like the soil on Mars, I said. Ralphie laughed. No way, he said. Mars soil is green, just like Martians. You've got rocks in your head, Ralphie, I said. That stuff about little green men on Mars is pure science fiction. Mars is actually called the red planet because of the rust in its soil. Well, I heard that there may have been life on Mars long ago, Phoebe said. Maybe they had little green men then. You guys don't know anything, Keisha said. Nothing could live on Mars. It's too cold. Miss Frizzle put an end to the argument. I think the best way to settle this is with our own eyes. Everyone, to the bus. Mars is only 49 million miles away. We can be there before lunch. I tucked Rocco under my arm and followed the Frizz to the parking lot. The bus looked a little different than usual. For one thing, there were a couple of huge rockets sticking out the back. If I'd known we were going to outer space today, I would have brought a bigger lunch, Arnold said as we climbed aboard. Buckle your seatbelts, the Frizz called. A regular spaceship would take at least 9 months to get to Mars, but this is the magic school bus. We'll be there in a jiffy. She fired the rockets and we blasted off. All planets travel around the sun by Arnold. Each planet travels around the sun or revolves in its own path or orbit. The further the planet is from the sun, the longer it takes to revolve. Earth is the third planet from the sun. It takes 365 days, 1 year, to make one revolution. Spring plus summer plus fall plus winter equals 1 year. All planets spin by Phoebe. The planets spin like tops as they revolve around the sun. Some planets spin very fast, some spin very slowly. Earth spins around or rotates once every 24 hours. This is what makes day and night. 1 rotation equals 1 daytime and 1 nighttime. Chapter 2. The great power of the rockets gave the bus enough speed to break away from Earth's gravity. We zoomed through the atmosphere into dark, airless space. Earth's Protector by Keisha. The atmosphere is the thin layer of air that surrounds and protects Earth. The atmosphere is held down by Earth's gravity. Without gravity, the air we breathe would fly off into space. A word from Dorothy Ann. Gravity is the force within a star or planet that pulls objects towards its centre. Once we were going fast enough, the Frizz turned off the rockets. Right away, strange things started to happen. I had been holding Rocco on my lap, but I let go of him for a second and he floated up to the ceiling. At the same time, Ralphie yelled, "Hey, I can fly!" He had unbuckled his seatbelt and was floating above us like Peter Pan. That's because we're weightless while we stay in orbit around Earth, Miss Frizzle explained. With the engines off, we're no longer being pulled toward the floor of the bus by gravity, so our bodies can float around. I've got to try it, Keisha said. She unbuckled her seatbelt and moved too quickly, spinning around in a somersault. Wow, we're floating in space. Yeah, we're totally spaced out. Soon, we were all bumping into one another as we tumbled around inside the space bus. We had to hold onto seat backs to steady ourselves. Arnold was floating upside down near a window. "Look at Earth," he said. "It's so beautiful from up here." We all floated over to see. Earth was a blue and brownish-green sphere surrounded by swirling white clouds. Earth is one of the 4 rocky planets along with Mercury, Venus and Mars, the Frizz said. But as you can see, most of the surface is covered with water. Some people think a better name for our planet would be ocean. There was a lot of water covering Earth. I couldn't believe how small the planet looked from space. "Hey, there's the moon," Wanda called, "or at least half of it." "The whole moon is there, Wanda," said Miss Frizzle, "but we can only see the part that is lit up by the sun's light." I remembered that the moon is covered with rocks. "Miss Frizzle," I said, "could we stop here? I always wanted some moon rocks for my collection." "Sure thing, Carlos." Miss Frizzle fired the engines to change our direction. We slowed down as we came near the bright side of the moon. It was covered with deep pits and craters that looked like huge bowls. We landed in one of the wide craters with a thud. "Put on your space helmets, everyone," Miss Frizzle instructed us, showing us how to strap on our breathing equipment. "You won't be able to breathe without oxygen tanks. There's not a breath of air out there." Since sound can't travel without air, we all had radios in our helmets so we could talk with one another. I stepped carefully off the bus onto the dusty ground. "Wow, I could hardly believe it. I feel like Neil Armstrong," I said. "One small step for Carlos." "Watch your step," the Frizz told us. "The moon has gravity, but it's much weaker than the Earth. You're going to be much lighter on your feet here than you are at home. Whee! Called Ralphie. This is better than a trampoline. He jumped easily off the ground, came back down, then bounced up. Soon we were all leaping and laughing. D.A. and Keisha started a game of leapfrog. I can leap like a real frog, Keisha said. I can jump like a cat, D.A. said. Come to think of it, I now weigh about the same as my cat does on Earth. There they go. We were having so much fun, I almost forgot the reason we had come here in the first place. Rocks, I said. It's time to put Rocco to work. I bent over and set Rocco down, but I didn't see Tim jumping behind me. He came down and knocked me over, and Rocco flew out of my hands. As I fell, I landed on Rocco's remote control and accidentally hit the on button. Oh no! Rocco's rockets fired up and he blasted off into space. Rocco! I cried. I reached up to grab him, but he zoomed away. I could see his tail wagging as he went. Poor Rocco, he shot off into the darkness. He could be lost in space forever. What would I do without him? Chapter 3. Hurry, I yelled. We've got to rescue Rocco. Rocco was speeding farther and farther into space. If we didn't get going fast, we'd never be able to catch up with him. As soon as everyone was aboard the space bus, Ms Frizzle fired the rockets and we took off after my little robot. Once we were out of orbit, we were no longer weightless. We could walk around the bus again. I'm sorry, I bumped into you on the moon, Carlos, Tim said. I hope we can get Rocco back. It's okay, I said. It was an accident. Keep an eye out, kids. We might see an asteroid or two, Miss Frizzle said. They're chunks of rock. Hey, Miss Frizzle, what's the bright star ahead? Phoebe asked. It's not a star, Phoebe, the Frizz told her. That's the planet Venus. Venus is the third brightest object we can see from Earth, after the sun and the moon. DA had done her report on Venus. She told us that Venus is so bright because the layers of thick clouds surrounding it reflect a lot of light from the sun. Soon we could see the swirling clouds of Venus, and it looked as if Rocco was heading straight into them. Rocco will be a goner if he hits those clouds, DA said. They're made of sulfuric acid that would burn right through his metal skin. Suddenly, I remembered Rocco's remote control. It was in my pocket. Maybe I could use it to steer him away from those deadly clouds. I had to act fast before the planet's gravity pulled him in. I pushed the reverse button. Right on! Rocco spun around and headed back toward the space bus. You did it, Carlos, Tim yelled. Now we just have to figure out how to get him inside once he gets close enough. But before we could even think about that, something terrible happened. A small asteroid came hurtling along. It hit Rocco and sent him spinning off again. Follow that robot, please, I called to Miss Frizzle. The space bus zoomed off, leaving Venus in our dust. Rocco was going so fast, soon he was just a dot in space. Hey, Carlos, can you use Rocco's radio signal to follow him? Ralphie asked. We can try, I said. I pushed the voice button. We heard a faint sound. Yip, yip, yip. I located Rocco on the radar screen, Miss Frizzle said. She set a new course and fired the control thrusters. We caught up with Rocco as he was approaching Mercury, the planet nearest the sun. We had to put on special goggles to block the sun's rays. We could feel the heat beating down on us. Miss Frizzle pulled a lever that set up special heat shields around the bus. Mercury must be one hot planet, I said. That the side that faces the sun is super hot, Keisha said. She was the expert on Mercury. But the other side is super cold. No other planet has such extremes of temperature. Yip, yip, yip. Rocco's radio signal was getting fainter. On the radar screen, we could see that Rocco was about to fly past Mercury. He was headed straight for the sun. Rocco's close to the sun. He's one hot dog. Chapter 4. Yip, 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 yip. Rocco's beep sounded like a call for help. I tried the reverse button on the remote again, but Rocco was out of range. All we could do was watch him on the radar screen getting nearer and nearer to the fiery sun. Look, DA said, something weird is happening. Rocco has changed directions. Now he's heading for Mercury. Great, I said. He'll be smashed to smithereens instead of burnt to a crisp. No, said Phoebe. Rocco isn't going down. He's going into orbit around the planet. Sure enough, the dot on the radar screen was circling around Mercury. He has become a satellite, Keisha said. He'll keep circling around Mercury just like the moon orbits Earth. That's lucky for us, Miss Frizzle said. Now we have a chance to rescue him. How? Ralphie asked. We can't just fly up and grab him. Miss Frizzle got that twinkle in her eye. Well, Ralphie, you'll be surprised to know that's just what Carlos and I plan to do. Huh? I said. You bet. You've seen pictures of astronauts repairing satellites out in space, right? Miss Frizzle asked. Just like them, we'll be wearing tether wires. We'll be attached to the magic space bus so we can't float off. But we'll burn up in the sun's heat, I protested. Not so, Carlos, the Fitz replied. She reached into a compartment and pulled out 2 shiny gold-coated umbrellas. I happen to have here the very latest in parasol technology. These parasols are made of special material that reflects heat and light. They'll protect us from the sun's rays. First, we had to get closer to Rocco. Miss Frizzle pushed a button on the instrument panel and we zoomed off toward Mercury. The magic space bus was now right between the sun and the planet. The sun looked twice as large as it does from Earth. Our goggles protected our eyes from the strong light. Miss Frizzle and I got into our spacesuits and entered the airlock, a small room with a hatch overhead. When the airlock was closed, we put on our helmets and turned on the oxygen. Next, we let out all the air in the room. Then Miss Frizzle checked our tether wires. All set. Open the hatch, Carlos. We're ready to go. What if my tether broke? I'd be floating in space forever. But I had to save Rocco. I floated out behind Miss Frizzle. The light was almost blinding. We opened our parasols and quickly strapped them to our backs. Now we could see better and move around the bus. I caught sight of a dark object floating near my head. Rocco! I reached up, but it was no good. He was too far away. Let out more of your tether, Carlos, the Fritz said over the radio. You've nearly got him. I didn't want to get too far from the bus. I let out the line, but the movement started me tumbling around. I went over and over in a wild somersault. Space swirled around me. Whoa there, Miss Frizzle said. She caught hold of my feet and stopped the spinning. Phew, I said. Thanks, Miss Frizzle. I was getting dizzy. Here, Rocco. Here, Rocco. Now Rocco was just a few feet away. With Miss Frizzle still holding onto my feet, I stretched forward. My fingers wrapped around Rocco's tail and I pulled him to me. Got him! Everyone on the bus cheered when they saw Rocco was back safely, especially Tim. Now, class, Miss Frizzle said, it's time to beat the heat and get out of here. The sun is hot stuff.